Welcome to the Talk Like a Leader podcast, where we explore the mindset, skill set, and habit set of leadership communication. Using these tips, techniques, and tactics, you'll be able to talk like a leader to build better relationships and get more done. Your host is Guy Harris, who has more than 20 years of combined professional and military experience in consulting, coaching, and training in areas like team and interaction dynamics, communication strategies and tactics, as well as emotional intelligence. Take it away, Guy.
Hi, this is Guy Harris. Welcome to the Talk Like a Leader podcast. This week's episode is titled The 7 Deadly Sins of Conflict Resolution. Now, frankly, I'm using the word sins a bit stronger than is probably legitimate from an actual what the word sin means, but I think you get my point. These are basically things not to do when you find yourself in a difficult or conflict situation. I find that it's better to focus on what to do. I also know that it's helpful to know what not to do so that if you find yourself doing it, you can recognize it and fix your behaviors. So let's talk about the 7 deadly sins of conflict resolution. The first is continuing to talk about the past. I have a whole episode on focusing on the future, so I won't go into the opposite of this too much, but I will say that one of the problems I see crop up in many conflict resolution conversations or in conflict conversations, difficult conversations, is a heavy emphasis on what has already happened. Well, we can't do anything about it, so let's move on. Again, reiterating a point I made in the Focus on the Future episode, I'm not saying you never talk about the past. I'm saying you don't want to continue talking about the past. Okay, second deadly sin of conflict resolution, trying to fix emotions. It's so common that I hear people talk about things like, well, you shouldn't feel that way, or I wish you didn't feel that way, or any number of comments about the other person's emotion, or frankly, even your own, and failing to recognize that emotions are primarily the result of how we interpret and respond to the world. I don't really want to get into a deep psychological analysis of what emotions are or are not. For our purposes, for practical application purposes, I'm going to say that emotions are the result of how we interpret and respond to the world. And while we can control our behaviors, we probably can't control our emotions. We can control our perceptions, we can control our interpretations, and by that, maybe indirectly control our emotions. But once an interpretation has been made, it probably triggers an emotion. And we can control our behaviors so that we control how other people interpret us. We can control how we interpret other people so we can exert some influence on our behaviors, some influence on our emotions. But ultimately, you can't really directly control emotions or fix them either for the other person or for yourself. So while we can't control emotions, we can control our interpretations and our behaviors. Better to focus on what you can fix rather than what you can't fix. So trying to fix emotions, second deadly sin. The third deadly sin is rushing the conflict conversation, which kind of flows from the prior conversation about fixing emotions. Let's be honest, conflict resolution, conflict conversations, difficult conversations are full of emotion. And when they're full of emotion, you just can't be in a hurry because you won't resolve the emotions. I'm going to say fix the emotions. You won't resolve the emotional component of the conversation quickly, at least not in most situations. So if a conflict conversation has grown to the point where you need a focused and intentional conversation about the conflict, probably there's enough emotional context to it that you probably won't get through it quickly. So plan enough time for the conversation. Don't try to have this conversation the 3 minutes before you walk out the door or the 2 minutes before a meeting. Carve out some dedicated time to talk about whatever conflict you have so you can give it the appropriate time. The fourth deadly sin, continuing to blame other people. Now, we all have our moments when we want to blame other people for our behaviors. And the idea here is basically I'm saying I'm blaming someone else for my behavior, saying basically, well, I did this only because you did that. I yelled at you because you yelled at me. Okay, that may actually be true. It's just not helpful. So focusing on the blame component rather than the responsibility component, meaning I own my own behaviors regardless of what the other person did. Continuing to blame others for our behaviors does nothing but seed and feed the conflict. It doesn't help. So let's not blame other people. Fourth deadly sin, continuing to blame others. That also leads to another deadly sin, which is trying to justify our behavior. So we blame others and justify ourselves. And I'd say that justification is sort of like blame's evil twin, and they often go hand in hand. Ultimately, blame is kind of a form of justification, and justification leads to blame. It's something I said just a minute ago about saying I yelled at you because you yelled at me. I'm justifying the why I yelled by blaming you. See how they go hand in hand. So often it's true that if you're blaming, you're also justifying. And if you're justifying, you're probably blaming. So trying to justify your behaviors rather than owning them sounds more like making an excuse, even though what we're trying to do is explain them. Honestly, justifying your behavior by blaming someone else is a poor explanation. If I behave badly, I need to own it and just move on. It doesn't matter what the person did or didn't do. If I behave badly, it's my fault. I have control over my behaviors. So trying to justify our behaviors is the fifth deadly sin. The sixth deadly sin is refusing to apologize or giving a conditional apology. So you can either refuse to apologize completely or phrase the apology in a way that's sort of conditional. Something like this. Well, I would apologize if they would apologize, they would stop doing, they would do blank, whatever. So we condition our apology on them doing something first. And that's just a bad apology. Another sort of bad apology would be to apologize for how the other person feels, which is kind of connected to trying to fix their emotions. Well, I'm sorry you feel that way. Well, no, you're not. You're maybe sorry you did a certain thing. You may be sorry that you're in the situation you're in, and part of that is because now that person's feelings are hurt. You're not sorry they feel that way. It doesn't help to apologize for another person's emotional state. You don't own it. You don't control it. So don't apologize for it. Only apologize for the things that you can own and control, that you can take responsibility for. I am sorry I said that. I am sorry I behaved that way. I am sorry I communicated that idea. Those things you can own. Or refusing to apologize at all. Let's be clear. Apology is not a sign of weakness. Apology is a sign of strength. Only a person who's confident in themselves enough to own what they did can apologize. So refusing to apologize or giving a conditional apology. And then the flip side of refusing to apologize is refusing to forgive. A lot like apology, forgiveness can often be offered in a way that's really contingent on the other person doing something. So I'll forgive them when they apologize. I'll forgive them when they stop doing. I'll forgive them if they do blank. Forgiveness is not about what they do. You don't actually do forgiveness for the other person. You do it for yourself. You forgive so that you can have the presence of mind to resolve. And by forgiving, you release the desire to blame, criticize, justify. So refusing to forgive something that's happened in the past is a deadly sin of conflict resolution, and I'll call that the seventh deadly sin. Now, so I offer this as we start the year 2021, kind of starting the year on how do we have difficult conversations? How do we navigate successfully through the difficult things we're likely to face in life with other people? Well, I suggest that if you'll learn to recognize your pattern of any of these individual or collective seven deadly sins in your communication patterns and work to eliminate them and work to replace them with more positive behaviors, you can talk like a leader. This has been the Talk Like a Leader podcast. You can listen to this show every week wherever you get your podcast. If you haven't, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm Guy Harris, and thanks for listening.